Once upon a time, there was a computer company called Zenith Data Systems. A bunch of things happened. Then, I got to use various models of their desktops in my middle and high schools. I was instantly fascinated by their looks, Windows 3.1, and their limitations. That's pretty much what this computer is about nowadays, limitation. But that is one of the reasons why it is great. Right out of the early 90s is this Zenith Data Systems Z-433D+. My schools had many of these alongside the newer Packard Bell style versions running better hardware. I was lucky enough to be allowed to take however many of these desktops as I wanted back then during a cleanout of the school's IT pile, and ended up with a stack of about 15 of these. Sadly, all but 3 of those have been lost to life circumstances, but I did have one of these Z400 desktops back then too. Those were the days. Anyway, this is another one, and in better condition, rescued from a trash pile. Inside is a 33 MHz 486DX with 4 MB of RAM, Cirrus Logic video, single channel IDE, and a 3.5-inch floppy drive. There are no expansion cards, and this is just about as plain of a configuration as you're going to get for this era. It came with no hard drive, mounting rail for one, and the odd CMOS battery is totally dead. Shocking, I know. First power on showed all the unsurprising configuration error screens, then goes to a menu with diagnostics and information. It's incredibly basic, and in this case, also rather unhelpful. The power on said to make changes in the configuration utility, yet it isn't here. In any case, no configuration would be saved anyway with that dead battery, so with the power on looking good, a fresh battery was in order. This board uses a 3.6 volt half AA lithium battery, and this inorganic one from Tadiran is a direct replacement to what used to be in here. Luckily, these are still easy to buy. While here, I also dug up a hard drive, a 1GB Caviar 21000. A bit too new for this system, but it will do. This next part is where it gets tricky for these desktops. In order to configure any kind of BIOS settings, they require a boot disk called the Zenith Configuration Utility. It is absolutely required to get these computers with dead and newly replaced batteries to set parameters and boot to hard drives. Thanks to the abandonware community at vitasware.com, this utility can still be downloaded and put on a floppy disk. Link is in the description for the download. I have no idea if it'll work for every Zenith system from this era needing this odd method of configuration, but it works perfectly for this model, using a basic bootable DOS disk. I didn't see where drive type could be set, but it did that on its own with no hassle and automatically updated whatever it needed to start booting normally and seeing hard drives. There's a lot of information in here, but in my case, I had to do nothing but boot the utility, confirm floppy drive, save config, and restart. After looking around in here, I loaded a Windows 95 boot disk and prepared the hard drive. I really didn't expect the drive to show up, since this is where I usually run into detection problems, but F-Disk did its thing without issue. Only half of the 1GB drive is seen by this hardware. And since I'm not using drive overlay software and this is actually working, I had no problem leaving it at that. Once that was done, MS-DOS 6.22 installed with no problems and booted. Now that everything is up for basic functionality, I wanted to give more to this system before continuing. A 3COM Etherlink 3, 10 megabit per second network card, and a Sound Blaster model CT4180 will certainly bring a lot more life into this otherwise boring setup. I don't believe these ISA slots have ever had anything installed in them before, so they were a little difficult to secure these cards into. I then found some screws that allowed for installing the hard drives into the lower 3.5-inch bay, freeing up the 5.25-inch slot for a possible drive addition in the future. Finally, the processor was getting a little too hot in this summer heat, and I had an extra fan laying around, so why not give it one? With the hardware taken care of, I chose to install Windows 3.11. It would have been fine leaving MS-DOS as the only OS on this, and I considered Windows 3.0 or even 2.0 instead. However, I didn't really want to fight drivers for the expansion cards, so opted for the relative easy route with 3.11. The setup even has basic drivers for this 3-COM network card already. Besides, native DOS mode can always be switched to easily. After Windows finished installing, I went ahead and loaded the drivers and a collection of random software to play with. So let's get to that amazing audio of this beast starting. Clicking around and opening things definitely makes you realize the age of this computer. It isn't the worst experience, but could certainly be a lot better. All the more reason to love this thing for what it is. I was able to make a network share and file manager, and my modern Windows 10 computer was able to see it and to send files to it. It's pretty cool seeing this work, and is very convenient. Trying out Internet Explorer 3 on the modern internet is a vastly painful experience on anything now. It manages to be even worse on this hardware. It still very much amuses me how anything at all can still load, given enough time, and I mean a lot of time. The footage here is sped up, of course, and you can still get a feel for just how slow this is. It's great. Testing out frogfind.com led to much faster, yet still very slow results. This neat search uses DuckDuckGo and turns results and websites into basic HTML for vintage computers. All of these sites would have loaded in some capacity, but things are going slow enough already. Testing out the classic Scorched Earth, and 33 MHz still proves to be too fast for this game. So this 10-player bot match goes by pretty quick. All sound is through the onboard speaker, of course. Another ancient PC speaker title is Paratrooper. No issues, just fun to see. I did once get caught loading this up on a school computer back then. If you guessed it was because it's incredibly noisy, you would be correct. Back in Windows, this satirical title called Die Blarney is always good for a cheap laugh. It still stands out as one of the strangest games I've played. Strange and funny. Sound effects aren't playing here, so you'll just have to use your imagination. Microsoft Arcade tends to struggle some between titles. Asteroids plays fine, as anyone would hope. Battlezone is an incredibly laggy mess with audio glitches to match, but can still be played. Centipede mostly runs well with occasional delays. And these are about all I tried with this pack. The Microsoft Entertainment Pack software all ran well without any noticeable problems. Some screensaver effects from Idlewild did slow down on load, but that is expected. All the games ran fine with no memory limits being hit as I went through everything. I remember playing with most of this stuff on my father's computer all that time ago, and it still brings me back. Now onto something that wasn't on my father's PC. Wolfenstein 3D runs very well in DOS mode, though again the audio is having some slight issues. That may be down to the drivers I have installed, or who knows, maybe the card is bad. This game is still very much playable on this system. To wrap up this video, I tried the usual DOS benchmark utilities. It is amusing to see some of these running on here on this hardware, and it's no surprise at all that not all of these options worked. Only a couple of the 3D applications started, with others silently failing. As for the games, Doom actually failed to launch due to a lack of memory, and there's zero hope for Quake. Short of changing out some significant components, there's really not much that can be done with this hardware. I have no plans for any other upgrades other than another 4MB stick of memory, if I can find this type in my parts collection. This computer is quite limited, but that's also why I like it. It is another great piece of computer history, and I will always do what I can to preserve what comes my way. I encourage everyone to save what they can, because once it's gone for good. Thanks for watching.